Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Artcasters. This is episode 249. We have a returning guest who hasn't been on for a while, but he's back and he's got a pretty big announcement, something awesome. If you guys aren't aware of yet, and we will get to Gary in a minute. But as usual, we're just going to go around and introduce ourselves and promote anything that we got going on. You're on my channel, so hopefully you know who I am. If not, I'm Scott with CircWorks. You can like I said, CircWorks right here on YouTube, also circworks.com. Also, let me keep forgetting to throw this stuff up. Also, so the big thing I have to promote right now is I just launched a new digital product called the Amazing Comic Book World Builder. And that is available exclusively at designcuts.com. I don't have that up right now, but I'll try to get it up there. But anyway, it's Design Cuts right now. You'll find it. It should be on the first page if you're watching this any time close to when we're releasing this video. But it's basically a suite of tools that you can use in Illustrator and Photoshop to create comics. I mean, it's got so many different things. And not only that, but all of my digital products are 50% off on Design Cuts right there. So if you go find that product on Design Cuts, or just go to Design Cuts and type in CircWorks in the search bar, and you'll see all my stuff. I've got a bunch of comic making tools. So that's the big thing. But those are, I think, got about a week and a couple days left on those deals. So definitely check that out. I don't know. So that's what I got going on. What about you, Josh?
All right. So you can check out my work at joshwithkemble.com. That's just like illustrations, graphic designs, all that kind of stuff. And then you can also see a sneak preview of my comic about faith and mental illness at quarterlystories.com that I'm going to be releasing through Marcosia Press shortly. So when I get more information on release dates and all that, I'll let you guys know. But if you want a little sneak preview of it, check that out. And then you can also get an album I created that's kind of like a folk, protest, weird, I play all the instruments album at the Bottle of Better Than. You can find that on all the streaming services currently. So yeah, that's my stuff.
Quick question, Josh. Since Marcosia is more of a comic book publisher than a traditional publisher, does that mean we'll get the book faster? Because it seems like when people option comics, they usually put them out quicker than, book publishing, traditionally, it's like a year. You got to wait for something to be published. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I have more information, I'll be able to know.
If you don't know, you don't know. But I'm just curious.
Yeah, so my publisher is actually on vacation till the 10th. So I'll be able to get hopefully some more solid details and stuff to share with everybody by then. But I do know all the art and stuff is, at least on my end, is done for now. But I think once they're able to kind of sit through it and format it and stuff, we'll be able to figure out a release date. But it probably, I would guess, it's not going to be quite like the weight you'd have if it were Random House or something. Yeah. Hopefully not. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. And as I mentioned, we've got Gary Hodges back on the show. It's been, I think the last time we had, was it the last time you had was when you launched your first book? Or have you had me on since?
First time. I think there was one other time after, but it's been a while.
Yeah. Because you tend to kind of go dark for a while and then you pop back up with something really awesome.
Hole up in my bunker and just get into crazy creation mode. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the awesome thing that you got, and I've got one right here. I just read it. It is really awesome. I would recommend anyone go out and you can go right here, go to the Etsy shop, Etsy/shop/dinosaurs vs Marsbots, and definitely get a copy. But so other than that, I assume that's what you got to promote, but maybe you could do a little better job than me. So
no, that's the big thing. No, that was great. In fact, I think I'm done actually. So it was great.
And there's actually a clickable link in the description too, because the one on the screen you can't click on, but you can go there and definitely check that out. If you haven't, I would definitely, if you don't already have the the first book, because this is a follow-up to Dinosaurs versus Mars, but 1987? Was it 85?
75.
75.
I'm trying to, there we go. That's 75. And yeah, this is my second. I'm officially a series now. I have 2 comics, so there you go. Yeah, so it's an sci-fi kind of horror series. It's an anthology series. It's this, which means they're only loosely connected. There are little threads going through them, but basically you can pick up any one of them, and it's a standalone thing. You're not going to be lost. Each story is a eyewitnesses' firsthand account of this top secret war that took place between the 70s and the early 2000s. It's men in black and shadowy special ops units and scientists and aliens, and there's now some dinosaurs in the mix too. It's a very wacky premise, but I try to give it some merit by doing a lot of character work. I try to spend a lot of time on the dialogue, and I try to, like all good sci-fi, talk about things and talk about ideas and try to put some heart into it. So it is very grown-up sci-fi. I do not recommend it for children. But if you're interested, yeah, you can go to the Etsy shop. I have a YouTube channel where I have making of videos for both the comics so far. There's a whole series for 75 and now a whole series I'm going to do one more on for 97. And then I have my Instagram too. So
awesome. Yeah, and like I said, I just read it today, and it is an awesome follow-up to the original, which I just love. So I mean, and I'm already hoping there'll be another one. So I don't know if you have any ideas or
I did. Before I even started with the first one, I sat down and did like a rough outline for a half dozen. I didn't know, but I never committed to like, I am doing a half dozen comics, like, because I was like, I don't even know if I'll finish this first one. I had never done a comic before.
Yeah.
So it's always just one at a time. I did 75. I finished it. It was a good experience. I enjoyed it. I was like, okay, well, I'll do one more. And so then I did this one, 97. And now I'm kind of like, all right, I'll at least do one more. So yeah, Squatch might lose his mind because he wants like 8,000 of them. I see him in the chat.
We're getting in the chat.
Yeah, I just sort of go like one at a time. We'll see. Like, but I did at least come up with plot lines for a half dozen.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I'd be happy with the trilogy, but you know, 6 of them would be awesome.
I would be happy with the trilogy. Yeah. That sounds great. Why don't we do one more? And maybe a short, like a 10-pager. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different ways you can go with it. But yeah, so I don't know. Is it kind of go, or do you even know this? Is it going to go in order, or will it like switch around? Or
no, it's gonna skip around. The only ones that will be in continuity, the very first one, 75, is the first one in the continuity. The very last one I do will be the last one in the but it's happened so far. Like I did 75, 97. Odds are I'm not committing to this 100%, but my intention had always been for the next one to be 79. So there'll be some hopping around in the sequence. So.
All right, cool.
And each one has a different focus without getting in, like, and this doesn't really spoil anything. 75, you could say, is very like Men in Black focused. 97 to me is very like civilian focused, like it's very eyewitness focused. I had always intended the next one to be a little focused on the scientists and things that are behind the scenes. But another one that I've been playing with a lot, that's been in my head a lot, is very like soldier focused. So each one is going to have kind of a very very cool. Let's look at their angle. Let's look at their angle of this, like that kind of thing. So.
That's exciting.
Awesome. All right, so let me click out of here real quick, and then I just want to check on the chat. We got a bunch of people in the chat. So yeah, the topic today, and Gary's going to be able to hopefully sum this up a little better. But basically, well, if you look on the thumbnail, I think I put selling your personal work to an audience, because you know the stuff we want to create is personal to us, but does that mean there's an audience for it? I know Josh can definitely speak to that because he's had his work is very personal, and he had a little trouble finding the audience for it. Hopefully he's found it. And Gary's the one that came up with this topic, so I know he's got a lot to say on that. So I'm going to just kick it over to Gary and have you kind of reinterpret what I'm trying to get out there.
So, and give me a little runway here, because as I was saying before we went on, like I have a lot of thoughts bubbling in my head right now, because this is a very weird time for me. I basically just finished the comic. I mean, it just showed up from the printer, I think last week. It feels like 1,000 years ago, but I think it was last week. I just sent out the first batch of comics last Saturday. And looking at the tracking numbers, like they're just starting to show up with people who bought them. Like there's still, a lot of them are just still like a couple days away. So it's this weird kind of limbo, this weird like liminal in-between time where I don't feel fully in that place yet, but I'm out of the creation part. And it's this weird transition of being in a creative mode where it's very introverted and internal and focused and closed, and pivoting to an external, outgoing, plugging and pitching and sharing mode. What I'm finding with this, and this is where I'm going with this, it's stirring up a lot of weird stuff with me. It's a very like, it feels like there's stakes. And that's new to me. I've had my work out there for decades in one form or another, but it's all, and are we swearing? Can I swear? Like, it's all bullshit stuff. Like, it's like logos and, like graphic design, like stuff I didn't particularly care about, like art for a column or, whatever thing I was doing. I think the reason it's like difficult for me now is this is the first work I've done with the comics that feels very personal, that feels like I put a lot into it, a lot of myself into it. Mm-hmm. And it makes you feel a little vulnerable. And that is a very unfamiliar experience for me. Now, I love personal, individual, intimate art. Like, I love art where I feel like I see the artist in that. It's my favorite kind, and I feel like in a lot of ways, personally, for my taste, it's the only art worth doing. Like, I mean, it's just too hard to do art, to not do stuff that like has some weight to it, some heart in it. But I think I'm finding that I'm not particularly good at it. I'm good at the making of it. I'm good at being in the bunker and making the art and putting myself into it and writing personal work. Mm-hmm. But like when it comes time to like, all right, now I'm going to put it out there and get it in front of people. And like what Dan has been sort of pushing me on, he's like, you need to go to publishers. You need to find an agent. You need to stuff like, and like, at first I thought that resistance was like, I was too hipster and bohemian for that. I don't care if it sells. It's just for me. But I'm realizing, I think with soul searching, no, I think it's that I'm a little afraid of it. Like, I think and I'm trying to figure that out. Now, the reason I thought this would be a good topic for us is I feel like we all do very individual and personal work in our own respective ways. Like I was telling Scott the other day, your work, to me, it feels very much like a love letter to all the movies and comics and cartoons and stuff you love and the era you grew up in, which is about like mine. I think we're pretty close in age. Like it's very recognizable to me. And Josh, yours is autobiographical, so it couldn't be more individual. And on top of that, you're talking about things that most people would have trouble talking to their friends about. Yeah. And you're putting in a comic for like everybody to read. So like, and while I have sort of an extreme premise, I'm very much trying to find the heart in it and make it character based and make these people real and put myself in it. And if you're putting yourself in it, well, then now you feel like you're putting yourself in front of people for $10 a pop, and that's kind of it's a weird feeling. So I guess, there's probably a lot of directions to go with that, but I just want to see like, how you guys have worked through that, how you think about it. Do you have that same kind of strange, like, ugh, like this is a weird feeling, I feel kind of vulnerable and exposed, or are you very breezy and easy about it? I don't know.
I want to say I love the topic because I think it's valuable, and I think it's good for, I mean, most of our audience and most of the people in our kind of group, which I would include you in, but it's like we kind of have this weird little organic like group of cartoonists who've kind of bonded online, and like I think almost all of us at some point are going to experience what you're describing. And so, and I do think it transcends genre. Like, I don't think you have to be doing like confessional work to feel that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I do think it's interesting what you're describing about the stakes, because I think that's kind of something worth digging into, where for me, like when I do, I guess a good analogy would be like if I'm in a band and I'm playing a live show and we're just going to do cover songs of songs I already know are hits. I don't feel that nervous. Like, I know I'm going to have fun, and I'm probably not even going to care if I screw it up that bad, because I know it'll probably go over well because we're just playing hits, right?
Right.
But if I'm going to do like my own thing, like songs that I wrote that have meaning, that I threw intention and thought into, and I have to kind of present it to a crowd, it's like that's a nerve-wracking experience because you have something invested in it,
right?
Other than just like, oh, this will be fun, So it's like there's a or like with a job, it's like you have an investment right there, which is just money. So it's like, okay, I'm making money. Like, I will do this logo. I'm doing it for money. I'll make it as good as possible because I have taste, and that's what you're paying me for. But at the end of the day, there's like this easy at least for me, like there's a very clear separation where it's like, okay, you want it purple? Sure. Like, because it's like, it's not mine. But when it's yours, and there's a couple reasons it's vulnerable, because like if I do a logo that kind of sucks for a client where they guided it in that direction, that's on the client. Like, that's not on me.
Be like, look, I know it looks bad, but
should have seen the fourth rough before they ruined it, or whatever. But you have no client to blame with your own personal work where you're doing creative work that's completely controlled by you. So all the flaws, everything in it is yours. And so it is way more vulnerable, right? Like, because you're not, you have no client to blame, and similarly,
like I got studio notes. I'm sorry. Like, they were telling me to put this part in. Yeah, no, it's like you, and again, I think that's important when you're in the creative process. I think it's important to be sort of militant about, I'm going to be true to my vision. Which you're right. I think I didn't think of it like that, but that's totally what it is. It's basically you own every part of this.
Yeah. And so the sense of ownership is real, because it's like you're putting something you own and care about and you've spent time on, and you've risked. And that's like, I don't know. I think that does create a vulnerability,
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Scott? Like, I mean, it's like with Young and the Dead, does that feel different, kind of putting that out and the feelings you have about that, as opposed to like if, let's say I hired you to do a comic or something for me and you're like, hey, I did this thing, like which do you,
There's no doubt about it. I mean, I've done, most of the comic work that I've got has been more for like a client comic, not necessarily for a publisher or whatever. And because of that, it's commercial art, which I guess maybe categorize any of what we do as commercial art to some degree. But with Young and the Dead, it is more a personal story, but it's kind of another angle to that it's, I guess, worth talking about from my perspective right now. Kind of what I'm going through is because I do, Young and the Dead is a very personal project to me, and I haven't really been able to get back to it, and I'm kind of I'm itching to get back to it. But right now, I'm doing a lot of stuff because I kind of made this decision that I if I can avoid it, I don't really want to go back to work for anyone. I want to kind of work for myself, and that sort of, for the most part, that includes client work too. Although I depending on the project, I may or may not turn down client work at this stage. But I want to get to the point where I don't have to take on client work and I don't have to go work for somebody. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the work that I'm doing is like personal work. Because it's a lot of chasing trends. It's a lot of finding different niches to go into and build passive income streams that way. But the way I look at it is that there's a number of ways. There's a bunch of people in this sort of doing this business that aren't really creatives. They're just going into it because they're sort of I guess it's I don't want to say get rich quick scheme, because it's definitely not any of that, but it's something that there's no financial investment to get involved. So people think it's real easy and everything. But there's a lot of time involved. And for me, there's a lot of creativity. So, but anyway, but it is sort of a struggle because it's not some of the stuff. And I try to find something, and there's a bunch of different niches that I could go into. Like I just did some political stuff, but that's really not my thing. That's not what I get supercharged about. I had a couple good ideas that I'm like, oh, that's a good idea, so I did it. But most of the stuff that I'm doing, I'm trying, because I've got so many ideas that, and I'm not really in a loss for ideas when it comes to stuff like this. So I'm always finding stuff that, I like this, but there is sort of that, okay, and this is kind of what we're talking about, where I guess I know I like that, but do other people like it too? And so I'm trying to find that middle ground, trying to find the things that I know that there's an audience for, but that I'm also into doing. So yeah, there is kind of a struggle, because I found, and a lot of this stuff is like t-shirts and things like that. And I found, I've struggled with like designing and selling t-shirts in the past, because I'll do this really cool design, but it just doesn't speak to everyone, as well as maybe a slogan with a graphic involved that's maybe a little simpler or something like that. So, it's trying to find out the stuff that I like, that there's also a market for and everything. So, so there's a balance between personal work and finding an audience for it too. But I'm hoping, my goal is that if I can get this thing going to the point where I will have more time, if I can get some of the stuff where I've just got money coming in from things that I've done, previous, and I have some of that already, so I'm already kind of on that track. I just need to build that up so it's, a full, it covers, my bills and then some and everything.
Right.
So it's, but I don't know. It's, I forgot where I was going with it. But anyway, yeah, my goal is to get to the point where I can focus more on some of these more personal projects. And it's all about kind of hopefully chasing freedom to do that kind of stuff and not have to worry about answering to anyone. Because I don't mind so much doing things that may not be exactly like comic book stuff or 100% what I want to do, if it's sort of on my terms. Because I think that's a big part of it too. So that's kind of where I am right now. So that's kind of my struggle between, finding an audience and also doing stuff that I love. So
yeah, and I mean, I definitely think that's not all that unusual. Like I find that, like, and this goes for anyone out there who might be like, maybe has a day job or is freelancing, doing work they're not like super happy with, and like trying to make that time to make their comic or whatever. Scott's gotten his comics done like when he's been freelance. He's gotten his comics done when he's been full-time in-house. Like, he gets his comics done, and guess what? I don't think at any time that window just appeared magically, like, here is the time to do your comics. It's like,
right.
It's something you have to consciously carve out. And I think that might go into like another territory of this, which is like, which I think kind of hints at like why there's vulnerability, is like you have to make this insane effort. And a lot of the time when you're in it, at least for me, and Gary, I want to hear your take on it, but it's like for me, I like when I finally got a publishing deal for 2 stories, I was like, I'm not crazy, you know, like, but it's like the whole time I was sending it to publishers, like even when they'd have a moment of like doubt about not picking it up, where they're like, this is brilliant, it's just it doesn't fit our line or whatever, but we like it, and like there's stuff in it that, and they'd like get into specifics of things they liked, and that like they had no doubt that it would get a publisher, but then of course pass on it. But even though like even through that process, like that little bit of positive feedback that wasn't just placating, like made me like, okay, so I'm not crazy to be like trying to get publishers, like, but the whole time, like it's this constant vulnerability because it's out there, it's being judged. And also, especially when I finally got the offer for like to publish it, it's like even then, it's like those days of just tension between like, yeah, we want to do it. I'm like, okay, where's the contract, dude? Like, you know, and like, and then I'm like, I'm just waiting for that to drop, because the weight of like the reality of that and the fact that that's something I actually want becomes really heavy. So, but the point is like the whole process of creating these things is a giant risk. Like it's a giant gamble.
Yeah.
And it's a risk you can't kind of pay back because it's a time investment. And so it's like it that puts a lot of high stakes on it too, because it's like, have I wasted, you know, have I wasted years? Have I wasted like, you know, the time and stuff like that? And you have those doubts kind of creep in during the process. But, you know, if you're a well-disciplined artist and you've been through, like Gary, you know, you've done one comic. And so it's like through that process of doing that one and finishing it, it's like the next one becomes easier because you get this regimented kind of system and you figure it out. But the second that's over and you have that window of finish, it's like all that risk kind of comes in. And it's, you know, so it's like you hope that you're not like, that you've kind of caught a little magic in a bottle, rather than like, you know, you're the creator who's like, I think this is good, but, you know, like, I don't know.
Well, I'm the only one who will think this is good. You both have said a lot of things like that I definitely want to comment on. Scott, I think you were. Oh, did we lose Josh?
I think he did it himself.
Sorry.
Oh, no.
And I'm working on, so I'm penciling in Photoshop, and I sometimes I'll hit the space bar, but I had the wrong window. Sorry.
Yeah, totally. So what you were saying about Scott, 100%. You like I have a full-time job. DvsM is not my.
You have a very interesting job.
Like, yeah, like I have a day job, and I have, you know, so DvsM has to happen on nights and weekends, and it's a commitment. Like you have to be willing to sacrifice to be, and it doesn't, I mean, as you guys know, it takes a while. Like it's not going to be like, oh, for a month I'll just really hunker down and bust out a comic. No, it's going to be a while, and like the more ambitious you are, the harder it's going to be. In terms of, you said something about like, you know, you've done it before, so you're kind of regimented, you know, sort of how to do it, and it's a little bit easier. I found, at least this time, yes and no. It's easier in some ways in that you sort of know all the moves. But I found that's also harder, that you know all the moves. And I think in one of my videos for 97, the making of videos, I talked about this. Like, and I didn't have this with 75 because I had never done a comic before. And when I sat down to write 75, I was just totally wandering in the woods blind. So I was like, well, I'll write the script and then figure out the next part after. And so I wrote the script and was like, well, I guess I should storyboard, you know? And so like I did that. And it's like, well, I guess I got to figure out page layouts. And so I did that. Like it was all very like one at a time, for no other reason than just ignorance. I didn't know what was next. So I couldn't really think about it or worry about it. With 97, I knew all the moves and all the beats, and it's kind of hard to focus on what are you doing right now? Like, I'm writing. I can't be thinking about drawing, like, right, you know, and like when I'm drawing, I can't be thinking about printing or covers. Like, it's, you know, it's focusing. So it's a little bit harder like that. But then lastly, 100%, you know, and yeah, that totally ties into it. I think when you're in the creative process, I think an important part of it is really learning how to tune out external influence and doing your thing. Like what you think is right, what you think is best, the comic you want to do. Did we lose Josh? Is Josh frozen?
Yeah, he may be coming back there.
No. That's exciting.
Two of me.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So you're the boss, you're the king, you're making all the decisions, and they're just command decisions. Like, this is what it's going to be, this is what it's going to look like, this is how I'm going to tell this story.
yeah.
And you're hoping that will all work out, but you have no way of knowing that. You know, it is very much a gamble of your time.
Yeah.
I think that's why, and I think this is kind of biting me in the butt now. I think that's why at the time, my solution to that is I need to get satisfaction out of just the process itself and the completing. Yeah. Like, I need to get, it needs to be about finishing the thing. Like, and that's what I should feel good about, and that's what I should care about. So even if nobody ever sees this or nobody likes it, like, yeah, I didn't waste time. Like, I made myself do this thing. I went through this creative process. But I think that's sort of like a little thing you just tell yourself to kind of muscle through it. And because at some point, yeah, somebody is going to be looking at it, and it will be deflating if you put it out there and everyone says like, well, that was cool. Like, you know, this kind of weird, like, you know. So no, I have been buoyed by both. I mean, a lot of the reaction I got to 75 and a lot of the early reaction I've gotten in 97, it does validate you where it's like, okay, I wasn't totally crazy, right? I have something here. This is something, right? Like, this is, and that it helps a lot. And it definitely helps give you the confidence to potentially go on and do it again. I don't know if this is a glib comparison, but I think of it all the time as like, it must be like what it's like to have a baby. Like, you know, it's so difficult. Like, if it didn't pay off, you would never do that more than once. Like, I mean, it's just a whole crazy thing. If you got a bunch of negative feedback after it,
or no feedback,
yeah,
I think it'd be really hard to muster. I mean, knowing what goes into it, especially that second time. Knowing what goes into it, knowing the work, knowing the sacrifice, knowing how you're gonna, you know, shed a lot of, you know, blood, sweat, and tears on this thing. Like, do you really want to do that if nobody cares, or worse, like that? But I have a weird ambivalent relationship with that because, like I said, I have this kind of thing where it's like I shouldn't worry so much about what the audience thinks. I should do my thing.
Yeah,
but you do care what the audience thinks. You know,
it's one of those things like where in order to do the work, especially for personal work, like I actually think stuff that caters too much to the audience can have like the counter effect of just being really stale and kind of generic, you know. Like a good example of that's like anytime you've watched like one of those cartoons that's like supposed to be funny and it's like written by a committee. Yeah. And the jokes are all stale and kind of like whatever's trending at the time. And the characters all look like recycled characters from films where the character animators actually cared. And it's like on paper, it's like technically good and like, but it's just not, it has no heart or authenticity. Right. And you can think of music like that too, where it's like there's music that's like written to be popular. It's just terrifying. Like, it's so bad.
I came across when I was trying to think about this, I came across a quote from Steve Jobs where he was talking about, he was actually referencing a Henry Ford quote. Nice. Where he was, I guess, supposedly Henry Ford said, if I had asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Like, it's, and Steve Jobs had always said, like, our job is to show people what they want, not give them, like, listen to them and give them what they're asking for. Like, we got to show them something new. And I think about that a lot when you're trying. I mean, I find the idea of trying to anticipate what an audience wants completely overwhelming. Like, I don't think I'm smart enough or hip enough to figure that out. And I think with like the examples of Steve Jobs and Henry Ford, I don't know if I would trust them if they told me, So
I agree. I think that's brilliant. And I think there's an area where it's like you have to care about the quality of the thing and understand that it's going to be going out to people. But you're right that in the process of creating, if you're thinking too much about like, well, this is something people like, like you run the risk of making something really stiff and generic that like no one will like.
Or and then like what was the dog in The Simpsons? Remember they introduced that dog character to Itchy and Scratchy that was like the hip cool dog, and he had like sunglasses and a backwards baseball cap and he had a skateboard and like everyone, because they're like, that's what the kids want, right? And they had to immediately kill him off because nobody liked it. Like everyone lost their minds. I mean, that's the worst case scenario, is that you'll be making that dog in the Itchy and Scratchy cartoon. But.
Yeah, so I think it's like it's good to like keep in mind, like obviously like think about story and storytelling and stuff, but in order to assume the best of your audience, like I think it is really good to kind of do what you're talking about, where it's like I'm going to make this as good as I can make it for myself, and not just like making it only for yourself, like a note in a diary or something, like. Make it notable and readable and legible and stuff, but it's like make the best thing you can make that kind of aspires to your interests, and like I think that tends to have a better shot at being appealing to people than making, and honestly, it'll also help you to be able to make it the best you can make it, because if you're making this generic thing where you're kind of catering to other people's interests and not feeding your own, it's like it could be really stiff and boring, like, so like the thing I liked about Dinosaurs versus Marsbots, we were talking about this before we started recording, but it's like I think Scott and I both like this, is that like, and I haven't read the second yet, I'm looking forward to it, but the first, I just was struck by how unorthodox it is for the genre, and it does have this kind of like a lot of character building that doesn't tend to happen in like in a story like this, in a non like kind of a lot of the character building in most kind of Martian attack type, which by the way, Mars Attacks is excellent, but
it's great. I love it.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of character building where it's like these over the top characters and them instantly and there's no depth.
So that's the soldier, and that's the
Yeah, and I liked that, you have like, in the first one, it's like diner style conversations going on with people and like really in-depth explorations in their own little tics, and like the way they talk is different. So it's not like watching the same character talk in a bunch of different faces, which happens in comics a lot too. So it's got depth, and what's cool is it's got a lot of yourself in it. So even like, even though the storyline is absurd, like it's really over the top, it's also like so convincing because of that. And I think like, were you trying to cater to the masses, I think you'd be like one of the beauties of that first one too is like the kind of mystery of it. So you don't see the threat instantly. Like you hint at it and kind of build it up, and it's I think much more interesting that way. So it's like, to me, I don't think you would have arrived at that if you weren't pursuing kind of doing a more internal process of making it.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like that's almost necessary to kind of make it decent, and also to get it completed, right? Because if you're worried about too many people, you end up in that kind of what is it, camel horse by committee thing, where you're just revising until you've murdered everything great about it.
Yeah. And it's just totally Yeah, and it's as bland and safe as it can be. Right.
Yeah. So I think I think that's necessary, but it is interesting because it's so kind of much of the process to do that. It is weird to finish and then have to kind of put it out and see if that process had some legs.
Kind of like every day. So all told, like from writing the first word of the script to being done, it was about 2 years. Like it was 2 years of work, of near daily work most of the time. Like on some level, maybe it was like a whole day, maybe it was like an hour or whatever, but a lot. And it really is like every day you put like another chip on the table, you know, just like, you know, like another chip. And by the end of 2 years, it's like, boy, it better come up black. Like, I mean, like this is, you know, you really have put yourself in there. But and I remember this with 75. There's a weird, to me, what feels like a paradox of feeling like the best chance you have to really connect with people and get them passionate and excited about your work is to be as individual and personal and true to yourself as possible, you know, which it doesn't like that somehow that's how it's going to work. But now it's all on your pace. It's all on your creative vision. Like, you know, if that's calibrated right, it'll probably work out. If it's not, you know, then that's where, like, you know, it comes up red and you lose all your chips. But it's
and
I'm watching the little roulette wheel go, and I'm just like, Anyway, everyone, this looks like a tall can. I'm not drunk. This is hipster water. It's nothing.
Okay.
It's just yeah. Oh, there we go. Cheers.
I think what you're describing too is pretty dead on. I also, you mentioned too, like the kind of being hesitant to send to publishers, and some of it's like hipster cool and stuff like that.
Well, that's what I thought. Like I said, I'm realizing I think I was kind of lying to myself. Like,
and I've had very similar moments where I was gonna just sort of for this, I was just gonna kind of do like, you know, maybe put it out on like, you know, direct publishing or something, and then like call it a day, you know, and just kind of maybe market it a little bit. And I realized like a lot of that for myself, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not also saying that that's bad, because I think that's a really good thing to do with your books, you know. But I also realized like a lot of the reason that I wasn't kind of like going the agent route and like the like trying to get a publisher route was a little bit fear, at least for myself.
Totally.
And I will say, like, that was confirmed when we were going through the process of pitching it, because it's like there's a couple things I think we fear with that, like as creatives. It's like, first off, like, I think there's a scary thing that happens when you start getting towards when you start having potential realities happen that maybe you want to happen. So I think that's scary. Like it's like that creep that I don't know. I always feel that toward the end of a project, like the one you just finished. It's like when you get that, like on that last page, there's kind of a weird, for me, I always feel like that very last page is like one of the hardest, slowest pages ever, every time on the project. I find every possible reason to kind of delay it when I'm that close to finish. And I don't know why. And I think
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Well, I just was going to say, like, I proofread mine probably way more time than I needed to, just stalling submitting it to the printer. Like that and that's always, and I remember this was 75, that's always the most painful part for me, is sending it off to the printer. Because then it's kind of like you're done, you know? And not really. I don't know why I think that. Like, it's not like I'm printing a million copies. Like if I find something later I want to fix, I can fix it, and the second run will be different. But it just feels like pencils down, and it's a terrible. And you guys were talking about it a few weeks ago on, I don't remember if it was Artcasters or 48-hour Art Check, but both you and Corey were talking about this weird, like, near end of project crash. Yeah, and I was fully in it, and it actually really helped me to hear you guys say that, because I was like, why do I feel so crazy? Like I don't feel like myself. I'm kind of down and snappy and crabby and like, what's going on? And I think it was this whole like, oh, I'm about to finish this thing that's been part of my life for 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the thing that's almost scary about it, and I think causes a little fear with that, is that it's become a reality. And so there is this weird thing that happens when you start kind of like you envision something and then it actually you actually make it happen, which is, you know, the reality of it, which can be cool and it can be frightening and it can be terrible. It could be a lot of things. And you've just made all of those things possible. Whereas when something's like an idea, even in the process of it being kind of carved away at and worked on it, it's becoming more and more real, but it's like the stakes are sort of in your head, like they're non-existent. And so in that headspace, it can kind of go anywhere. It could go to, and I think like for me, I know that was a huge thing with publishers too, where it's like once you start submitting, well, I mean, it could be any publisher. It could be a big publisher. It could be a small and you start going through that process and seeing the reality of what publishers are actually interested in. And that's nerve-wracking, right? Because like they may not be interested in it. It's the same with like the finished book, like where it's like you're so close to done. And also, like you were saying, it also puts the onus on you to like, well, what's the next book? Or do all this other stuff that like most of us creatives like don't like doing, which is the like, hey, check out my stuff, guys. You know, like none of us like that.
Yeah, so hard. And this process, it's funny. I went through a phase where I was fascinated with like polar expeditions. I was reading all the books on like that kind of stuff, like we're in that kind of golden age of exploration and discovery. There was a book, I think it was about, I'm not going to commit to which expedition it was, but the captain had said, if you are in any way false, this ship will find you out. Like there's like, and you know, the idea being like, if there's anything about you that's not 100%, like going through this process is going to reveal it. And I think like going through this in a mini version, going through this process of doing a comic, it's revealed to me that I didn't just take the identity of an introvert. I didn't like to say I was an introvert. I am absolutely an introvert, like 100%. And the promotion part of it is very difficult for me. I can kind of fake it. A lot of people don't believe me when I say that. It's like, oh, you know, you can gab and gab. As soon as like this goes down, like I will collapse on the couch with ice cream. Like it'll just be like, oh boy, you know, like, so it's like I can rally, but like it's not my natural default state.
Yeah, it can be a learned thing. I mean, and the fact that you took the steps to do the videos, I mean, because I'm very much an introvert too, but I'm getting so much more comfortable now to the point where like I just did this thing with the Design Cuts today, this live event. And to be honest, I mean, I didn't even really do that much prep just because I've been doing this stuff for so long now. I'm a little more comfortable with it, and that's coming from an introvert. So the more you do it, the better you get. It's like anything else. I mean, and I still, like you said, I still need time to recharge and everything like that. But now I'm more confident with it, and it just comes with time. I mean, I have so many videos up, but if you go all the way back to the beginning of the videos, you will see a very different personality there, and it's very much like
that's a great example for any introverts watching, because the persona you do, like especially when I see you at cons and I see you working with customers, and I mean, if we ever do cons again. In the past, when I've seen you at cons.
Well, even if things go back to normal, I may never do cons again.
You know, and like your videos, like, you know, you have the whole like mad scientist in like the basement, you know, lab persona. It might be a shock to people. It's like, no, I'm a little introverted, a little quiet. Like, but you can do that very convincingly.
Yeah. And that also helps, I think. In the beginning, it helped because there was a little bit more of a persona attached to it that not necessarily, you know, me, like I'm talking to you guys now here. There's a little bit of difference between these videos and the other videos I do. And that kind of always helped because I noticed that like, because I'm, this Halloween season, I've always been really big into Halloween because you put on a costume, and a lot of times the costumes I wore, I would try to learn the voice of two other characters if there's something I could learn to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were years where I didn't even get out of character. I was that character throughout the whole, thing. And it's just because it's getting out of who I am, because I can't really, if people are going to make fun of me, they're not making fun of me. They're making fun of this character.
Right.
Not that people would make fun of you, but you always, as an introvert or whatever, you usually have that fear that, oh, if I do this, what if people are going to laugh at me or something like that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think in grade school and high school, I think I was probably a little bit of the class clown. And that was absolutely like, I think it was very much like I was shy and socially awkward. And it's like, well, if I'm being like the silly comedian guy and people laugh at me, it's like, well, that's not me. Like, they're laughing at weird performative Gary. So it's
that was me too. So yeah, very similar. But we had a question. I'm going to go back a little bit here, because we had talked about sort of validation, and this question from Mary Jackson: what are some things that keep you motivated when you're not getting that validation and positive feedback? That's
a good question. For me, at least, I would like to hear your guys' answers. For me, it's kind of the same thing that got me started with doing DvsM 1975. I reached a point where, like a lot of creatives, I've met a lot of people like this. I was one of them. You have a lot of ideas for things you want to do. Like, I have like half a screenplay written. I have an eighth of a novel written. I have like a couple ideas for a comic. Like, there's all these like half-baked things you're kind of rotating through in your head, and you haven't actually seen any of them through. I got to the point, almost like Jules's moment of clarity in Pulp Fiction. I was just sick of being that guy. I got to a point where I was really kind of disgusted and disappointed with myself. And I just made up my mind spontaneously, like, I don't want to be that guy anymore. I want to see at least one of these things through in my life, And I had a few things. I had some screenplays. I had a novel I had been screwing with for like 10 years or 20 years. And I had some comic ideas. And I stupidly thought, oh, well, the comics will be easiest. I'd never done a comic. I was like, a novel's going to be really hard. Like, look at you guys laugh. Ha, 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 ha. The comics. Yeah, but that's totally.
It's an honest mistake. I think it's a mistake a lot of people have made.
I think hard. If I was on the novel, I'd probably have, like, it'd be done and published by now. But I thought, like, well, that's manageable. I can do a comic. And I sat down and did it. And even though it was grueling and far more difficult than I thought, it gave me that hit, and it gave me that satisfaction. And nothing beats, even though it was a little bit less that second time. I was talking about it with another comic guy, where it's like, it's a little bit like an addiction thing. Like, the hit's a little less each time, but nothing beats putting in all that work, sending it off to the printer, getting the proof in the mail, and finally seeing, like, this is the thing. It's real now. Like, that is a pretty big hit. Like, that's pretty good.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's still the same thing. When I was working with 97, like, basically every day, it's like, I'm not going to be a quitter. Come hell or high water, I'm going to finish this effing thing. Like, and that keeps going. If you have doubts, if you are feeling tired, if you're not sure, like, whatever, it's like, look, I have committed to a page a week. I have put it out there for everyone. I'm doing a page a week, so they're all going to make me accountable. I'm making myself accountable. I don't want to have to make an announcement like, you know what, I changed my mind about the whole comic thing. Like, I am seeing this through, and that kept me going in the tough times and the dark times. So
I love that. I also like that. I think part of why we laugh when you say, "Oh, I'll do comics. That'll be easy." I think all of us as cartoonists had that thought, and then we got addicted to this terrifyingly horrible process.
Horrible addiction. No, for sure. Someone said that to me. They're like, maybe I'll do a comic. Maybe I have all these ideas. A comic is probably easy. I would also laugh and laugh. Like,
but the funny thing is, we all had that moment, because it's like, I really, honestly, I think everyone overestimates their own abilities in comics until they start doing comics, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is crazy. And I love that description of the process too, where you were talking about kind of having these moments of like you're kind of assembling these little pieces and just sort of hoping they all kind of work together. But there is a lot of uncertainty in that process too. But I do think
I used recently talking to someone, I was like, everyone knows how difficult it is to work on a group project.
Yeah.
So now imagine a project where basically you're the group in different parts in time. So like I'm writing a script for future Gary to draw, and future Gary is drawing something that past Gary wrote. It's the worst group project with the worst kind of temporal disadvantages where it's like, and you're just, I mean, I at least am kind of militant about like, this is the script I wrote, like, and the plan I came up with, like we're following the plan.
Yeah.
It's like a plan that I came up with, a different Gary came up with 2 years ago, and I'm just hoping this is all going to somehow come together. But
I also, in that same scenario too, it's like in order to write it well, because I've seen this in comics, and I like that you don't do this, but I have seen this in a lot of younger comics where it's like a writer will suddenly, you can kind of tell they're fudging the writing so they don't have to draw hard scenes. So in order, the weird thing is the process you're describing is so interesting because in order to write it well, you have to kind of forget how annoying it's going to be to draw. Yeah. And so like if it needs a I've seen some previews from it, like, where you have like the Grand Canyon, and it's like, you could have just had a different,
it could have just been a field. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But, so the funny thing is the process of drawing it, it's like at least for me, I'll have these moments where I'm like, oh, it's a crowd scene. Thanks a lot. Like past Josh, like I'm an angry illustrator illustrating for the worst client who has really high expectations.
Came up with this design document. Oh, that was me.
Yeah. And it's me. Yeah. So I think that's a really good description.
100%. And especially like with 75, you saw it, with 97, you'll see it. There's such a diversity of things. Like guaranteed, if you're going to write any kind of a comic, you're probably going to end up drawing things you've never drawn before in your life.
Yeah.
And that was also that's an example of something that's harder the second comic. The first comic, I was pretty good about saying like, I don't know how I'm going to draw this. This sounds like a pain in the ass, but like I'm script Gary, and script Gary thinks this is the story.
Yeah.
Drawing Gary's just gonna have to figure it out. He's gonna have to man up and like figure out how to draw this shit. But like with 97, having gone through drawing a comic, it was really hard writing it. It's like, God, this is gonna be a nightmare. Like, what am I doing? Like writing in the middle of a scene saying like, this reads great, but this is gonna be awful. Like for me, like in about 30 weeks, I'm gonna be hating life, because I have to draw this thing I just wrote. Yeah.
I love it. I don't know, Scott, do you ever find that? Because I mean, you have some pretty crazy detail in Young and the Dead. Like that, one of the things that blows my mind about that series is like your kind of ornate and ruled out backgrounds. Yeah. And then there's just, there's not to like give a giant, spoiler or anything, but like, one of the places you chose to locate many scenes in is like an arcade with a bunch of arcade machines in perspective. And like, I can just imagine you like first panel being like, yeah, this was a good choice. This was a great. Yeah. And then like 5 panels in being like, thanks a lot, Scott.
Yeah, this is terrible. Should have been a shoe store. Yeah.
Well, the first thing I would say about that is I wish I had learned Clip Studio Paint when I drew that scene, because that would have made that perspective in that arcade a lot better. But to be honest, and I always talk about this where, I'll spend some time on the establishing shot. And then once you've established where you are, you don't really have to put so much of that detail in. You can just have a hint of like an arcade cabinet or something like that. So, that's the thing. And I'd like notice with Gary's work, it looks like you probably design things and then you repurpose it in other panels and maybe zoom in, or as I noticed, like it seemed like the black eye that the main character had.
Black eye. I was just going to say that was a nightmare to do that. And that was the thing. It's a little, there's a character in 97 that has a black eye, and you see this character a lot over a lot of pages. And I tried to draw it with a very kind of irregular, you know, I wanted to look kind of gnarly. I wanted to look like not like a movie black eye that kind of, you know, I wanted to look like, oh, that looks painful and bad. That was one of the things. There's a few things I'm thinking of for like stuff in 97, where by the third or fourth time I was having to draw it and try to make it look consistent. You know, like, I was like, why did I do this to myself? What was I thinking? The other thing was, and sometimes you could cheat. Sometimes it's like, well, this is a very similar position, and let me just lift this element and put it in and tweak it a little, and that's the same. But sometimes it's like, well, this character's head's in a completely different position, and like I have to kind of redo it, and now I got to make it look like it's looked 20 pages before this. For, you know, same with a nightmare in this one was drawing, just because I realized it's something I don't draw a lot, women's hair. Like, that was just something where it's like, it's real easy with men just to do kind of like close short hair, and it's like, that's easy. But like long kind of flowing, it's like, oh, why did I do this? This is terrible. Another thing, one of the female characters has these rings on her hands. She's kind of a rocker girl, and she's got these rings and, you know, bracelets and things like that. The third or fourth time I was drawing them, it's like, why did I, like, you know, that script, Gary? I'm gonna have a word with that script. Yeah. We're doing it in a dark room. Like, the whole thing is set in a pitch black room, and it's just going to be dialogue bubbles.
Yeah, that's so much character. And the one thing that, you know, like, I'll see people where they'll design a character with a bunch of tattoos. And I'm like, okay, good luck with that. And the next thing you know, they're all wearing long sleeve shirts everywhere.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's something I never thought about before, because with 75, it's men in black. It's a couple guys in black suits. It wasn't that excruciating to like just draw that over and over. But yeah, this one, one character in particular has a very specific look with a lot of accoutrements. You know, yeah. So like, so now it's like, well, now I've drawn. And it's like the second time you draw it, you're like, damn it. And this is important. Like, it's important to see what she looks like tells you something about her. So like, you kind of need to do all these little things, but oh boy.
And just, you know, the other thing that it kind of comes into play is just the emotions that you got, because basically that story, and I love stories like this, especially in movies, because they're you can usually do them in a very, very limited budget, but are these, for the most part, single location scenes, where most of the book, I mean, there is a big action scene, and there's some previous scenes out in the desert, but for most of it, it's just in a room. But you get so much character with these two characters and just the one person, and just the actions and the fidgeting and the messing around with a pack of cigarettes or whatever it is. And I mean, you do such a good job with that. So I just want to commend you on that.
That was so, and this won't spoil anything, but yes, there's a lot of it is very, when I was writing the script, I was describing it to people. It's like, it's very black box theater. There's a lot of it that's kind of two characters in a room talking. And that's a bold called shot with a comic book, you know, like, I mean, there's a lot of ways that can go wrong. So I knew it was really on me, to capture all those little micro expressions and gestures and mannerisms, but also really write this character interestingly and write the dialogue interestingly, because it's got to carry this. Now, I was very lucky. I'm glad you brought it up, because now I can give a little shout out. I was very lucky with my reference model. There's a friend of mine who's also a very, very good artist, way better than me, Laura Jacobson, who she was my sort of stand-in for the Jenny character. And she loved the script, and I think she got the character. And not only that, she's a accomplished artist herself. She's done a lot of life drawing. She's done a lot of painting, portrait stuff. So she had a very good sense of kind of how to model and like what angles do you need. And if I could give her like minimal input, like with your face, do a little, and she would like know like immediately where I was going, you know. So I had a lot of good resources. I took a gazillion pictures of her to kind of try and give me like, all right, now I have like a resource library where when I'm sitting and drawing, like, you know, I need her to look a little like this or a little like that, I could find something that, would kind of get me there, at least in the ballpark, and then I could take a breath away myself. But
yeah, well, it definitely shows whatever techniques you use. I mean, you definitely pulled it off, because there was no, you get the scene, like I said, the scene, single location, pretty close quarters for the most part, but never did it feel like talking heads at all. So
yeah, and that was the fear. I mean, the talking head thing, you don't want that. So, and that's also why that was another burden I put on myself, where, no offense to anyone who's done this, I get it. Drawing a comic is hard, but, and I'm not saying that glibly, it's hard. Whatever shortcuts you are willing to take them. But I personally have a pet peeve when I'm reading a comic and I can tell they drew something once and they're just sort of repeating it, or like you can tell it's very copy and pasty. And like I said, I'm not going to judge anyone for doing that. I get it. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Which means every time you see this character, you're redrawing them, and that was
that surprised me. You really, I mean, I would have assumed that some of those panels, especially like the backgrounds and stuff, you were reusing elements. But
now backgrounds, I freely admit, I don't want, backgrounds, I would, if I was like, I can use that background from that panel, okay, let's just pull that in. Character stuff, it's like, no, I think I need a different vibe, I need a different energy, I need a slightly different something. So I got to.
I also think that technique can be useful, because like just the scene where she's out in the desert and she's lying on, I think she was lying on a blanket or the ground, I don't remember exactly. And she's just in a pose, and the next one you see almost the same pose but slightly different.
But taking a drag. Yeah.
And it was, I mean, and that just, the fact that the background all looked the same, that was not a detriment to that scene. That's the way it should have been, because then you just see that slight movement, and that it helps with that passage of time, or even a little bit of passage of time. Because at first I didn't even notice. First I might have thought it was the same scene. I'm like, oh no, she's in a different. Yeah,
it's this person just lying back and kind of lazily smoking out, like in the desert, lying on a blanket. Yeah, like it's like I love that little stuff like that. I love those. Dan described it as kind of a cinematic touch, but I like those little like quiet moments in the comics I do, where like we'll get to all the crazy action and madness and arguing and emotion and all that, but like at least right now I wanted, especially in the opening, I wanted that kind of peaceful, serene, quiet opening, with like no dialogue and just sort of watching a person do something. So I wanted to really take my time with that. A few pages of just like, let's just watch this woman doing her thing. And then then we'll go off and running.
There were so many little things that I just picked up on that was just so brilliant that I might not have thought about. And it's just like the one thing that, I mean, her car with the one broken headlight.
I'm so glad you noticed the bit. That's one of the things. And someone else commented that, I think because in the trailer, I did a trailer for the comic on YouTube. And you see like, she's got this old Fiero. And like, if people aren't familiar with the Fiero, it had like the headlights that, go up like this. And a common failing to them is one will just get stuck and it will always be up. So the Fiero, by the time 97 is around, is not a new cool car. Like, and I think it just says a lot. It says a little bit about her. Like, it's just a little bit, it's like, she's got this car, it's not in the best shape. She's sort of not in the best shape. Like, it's just kind of like you get a feel, but she's doing her thing. She's living her life. She seems content. But like, I just liked, those are one of those little touches you put in that I really loved. And I was hoping like, well, I hope someone appreciates this little thing of like, oh, look at how the headlight's still stuck up. And this little background thing, like this car in the back. So it means a lot to me that you noticed that.
Yeah. It adds to her character. It's something that's not actually part of her or anything she's wearing or anything like that, but it's still part of her character. And like you said, that seems like a character that you got more information about her through that.
Yeah. That was a lot of what that first thing was not only was sort of setting a kind of quiet, nice tone, but it was an interesting exercise. I had not done this with 75 of like, how much can I tell the reader about this character with no words?
Yeah.
Right? Like just by how she looks and what she's doing and what's going on. Like how, like in like subtlety, quiet, which, like I said, it was a fun creative challenge to write those first few pages, just to like, And the script, I mean, it looks very funny where you're just writing like, you know, she's doing this, she's doing that. There's no dialogue. It made me a little nervous when I was showing it to people where they're reading like, this doesn't read like a comic book. But I mean, I don't know.
I think that's actually just an underused tool in comics, and I think I try to do very similar things where it's like I'll have a panel, a couple panels where it's like not much movement, and maybe it's a subtle gesture or a subtle move, and one of the things that helped me rethink that was like the guy I mentioned on like every single one of these, which is Chris Ware, you know.
Yeah.
But there's a Ware panel in Jimmy Corrigan that like it just blew my mind, and it changed my approach to backgrounds and comics in general. It kind of ties into what you're talking about of like redrawing everything, where it's like it's Jimmy Corrigan's like you see this like little Superman, and he's like about that big, and he's on the top of this like giant building, and Chris Ware like fills like the entire page with this crazy perspective shot of this old Chicago skyrise, and like all these cars at the bottom, and then a little like Superman. And then the next figure, it's the Superman character's like jumped off, but he's just splatted on the ground. And he redrew everything, like every line in it. And so exactly that you barely notice, except that like it's almost like he intentionally screwed up a few parts of it just so you
show you
through the entire thing. And I remember when
that is such a weird flex, like just to show, like that's amazing though. That's really,
and I always thought that was the coolest thing, and I always kind of like ever since then I've kind of purposed to do that. Where you know, if I'm doing something for a client and it's on a tight deadline, I'm obviously gonna repurpose as much as I can. But it's like for myself, like I try to redraw everything. So even if a background's repeating or a figure's like face is like the same, I still want the redraw of it, just because. I remember that moment of like that wasn't even for the reader, that was for cartoonists. That was just like a middle finger to cartoonists.
Like because no reader's gonna care.
Yeah,
like, they wouldn't begrudge him if he had copied it.
Yeah,
like a cartoonist will read that and it's like, this guy's a maniac. Like this,
But so, and also very similarly, like same book, Jimmy Corrigan, like there's like a whole page of just panels of like Jimmy Corrigan sitting at a coffee shop, and then he'll go like this, like sniff, like he just wipes his nose, and it'll happen like a couple times, and it gives you this whole character in like these subtle movements. And so I do really appreciate that. I think that's one of the unique things about your work is like you don't mind kind of waiting, and you don't mind kind of patience, and you play with time in a way that I think a lot of comics are just trying to write like speed metal, which is fun, you know, but it's like, it's not, it doesn't all have to be speed metal. And when you're writing a song, you can have like a part that slows down, and then you have a build up. And I think, I do think that's a good thing, that you have like these moments of quiet, and you'll kind of rest on a character or subtle moment. And honestly, I feel like that should be more commonplace in comics in general, right? Like it doesn't all have to be action.
I think, I mean, and this is a generalization, and I don't have anything against like, I don't know, more typical comics. Like I'm not being judgy about it, but I just know personally, like I'm getting to an age where I think I'm more interested in that kind of stuff. Like that kind of like I want to see something a little different. I mean, I picked up, about a year ago, my comic when I was a kid was G.I. Joe. I loved the G.I. Joe comics. And I just loved it. Snake Eyes and all that stuff. I just couldn't get enough of it. And I picked up one of the like compendiums where it's like the first 10 issues or something. And I was reading through it. I think I actually picked it up as like research for 97 because there's a little bit of like combat in 97, like with soldiers. And that's another thing, like I've never drawn anything like this before. Maybe G.I. Joe will give me some ideas. G.I. Joe gave me no ideas. And I had forgotten like how simple and kind of like, the pacing is very like, choop, 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 like it is very speed metal, and it's very broad and very big. And I realized like, I can't use any of this for what I'm trying to do. Like it's fun to revisit it, but I can't really do it. I appreciate your compliments about the pacing. It's funny, you can't really tell readers. I've entertained this notion. I would never do it because it's just so pretentious, but I've entertained the notion of putting on Etsy like a sort of reader's advice guide. Like, like don't just try to burn through this on the bus. Like sit down, pour yourself a drink, lower the lights, like kind of like just relax, like unwind with this like you would a book. Like, because you can't really control how people approach a comic, but that's kind of how I wrote it, at least. I wrote it to be sort of enjoyed like a book, like just to sit and kind of relax and read it. But
well, and you do things like that sequence that Scott was describing, where it does, that does have the beauty of comics is a little more than a book. You have a little more control over the tempo, like,
and
so I think that
you can communicate the tempo to the reader, like hopefully if you're executing, it'll slow them down, like or speed them up or whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah. I love it though. So I think that on the semblance of like things that, you kind of do to sort of keep yourself going while you're making these things. Right.
Yes.
Are there any other tricks? Like I'll touch on one, and I'm curious if anyone else will admit to this as being a motivation. Along with the motivations you mentioned, which are usually my more positive motivations, sometimes my motivation, and I do this rarely now, but sometimes if I need a little juice, I will literally try to think back to my past of people who've doubted me on anything. And kind of like try to like make that like this abstract enemy. It's one of the things I like about like the war of art, is like the idea of this resistance, which is fake. There is no real resistance, but it feels real.
Yeah.
But it's like so sometimes I'll make it an enemy that I have to disprove. And so like it's not the most healthy, but it's worked before for fuel for me, where I'm like I will create this enemy of like that's like, you're not going to finish this, you're not going to get it out there, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I will, like I don't know.
I remember you talked about this before, I think, in the Artcasters, and I've always kind of been amused by it because for sure I will confess there one example of that. Generally, my motivation is exactly what I answered before. It's like I'm going to be a person who finishes projects now.
Yeah,
like that's my thing. I've spent most of my life not finishing projects. Now I finish projects. That's who I am. But I will admit, this was years and years ago. The woman I was dating at the time, I had talked off and on about doing a Dinosaurs versus Marsbots comic for years. At that time I had a coloring book and I had prints, and it was kind of a different thing. It was more campy. It was way more Mars Attacks. It was sort of silly, like, it was sort of fun. But I had talked about like, I kind of want to do a comic. Like I kind of want to do like a serious comic and like do like more mature and kind of get more into the ideas. I talked about it off and on. At one point I hadn't brought it up for a few months or something. I brought it up spontaneously. And her reaction was something like, oh, I didn't know you were even still thinking of doing that. Like, it was very dismissive. Like, I kind of thought you had moved off that thing. And even though I don't think I showed it or said anything, it really pissed me off. Like, it really was like, and that might have been one of like the little micro movements toward like, you know what? No, I'm going to like, and in a way, like maybe I kind of was like, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right to doubt.
Yeah.
And I don't like that feeling, and I don't like being perceived that way, and I want to rewrite my biography a little bit,
Yeah.
So I do think about that sometimes, that reaction of like, oh, the comic thing, you're still going to do that? Like, it's like, oh yeah, that's.
Yeah. I also think it is amazing that just the act of finishing something once, like you were describing it as like a dopamine hit or something, but it's like it is something that you kind of desire again the second you have it, and it's very fleeting because it's like I don't even know if it lasts beyond like the print, Like,
Oh,
at
it
least,
goes real quick. Like a sieve. It just flows right through. And that, I mean, this sort of goes
Yeah.
back to the original topic. Even positive feedback, I have a lot of trouble with. Like
Yeah.
it's, I don't know. A comparison I made to myself in some notes was like, it's kind of like it's a food I know should be nutritious, but I don't know how to digest it. Like it's this thing that I appreciate it. Everyone who liked my work, it means a lot. It really does mean a lot to me, but it doesn't give me any kind of permanent confidence, in any way. I still almost immediately revert to sort of insecure, neurotic art. Like and I don't know.
Yeah, I can kind of understand that. It's like you want to, at least for me, it's like I don't mind hearing nice things about my work. It's kind of encouraging, but whenever I do, it is one of those. It's hard to fight the instinct to be like, well, here's where you're wrong. Like, like I don't know.
Well, what I'm bad at, I do a lot of. I can very quickly come up with ways like they're just being nice.
Yeah.
Like that's what they're gonna say.
Yeah.
And like I can sort of minimize it or dismiss it way too easily.
Yeah.
So.
Which is funny because we don't do the same with negative feedback on personal work. Like, you're like, yeah, they're sincere, like. But if you hear positive feedback, at least I relate to that a lot too. Corey talks about it too a lot, like the idea of like imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
And I definitely think that's like a byproduct of being a creative a lot. And I think one of the downsides of it is like you have no doubt of people's like negative feelings. Like you're like, okay, yeah, that's probably what they actually think for sure. But if somebody's like, that's the way you drew that hand is really cool. Like that's a really cool hand. You're like, I don't know, like you're not really, you don't really think that's a good hand,
Yeah.
Yeah, but the negative feedback, that's one of the, like for me, when we're talking about motivation and everything, and I get in this place where sometimes I don't want to show people what I'm working on as far as to get feedback. Like I was worried what like professionals might think or something like that. Is this really good enough? And it's kind of, again, that's sort of the the imposter syndrome. But so for me, because I'll be working on this and I'm like, I kind of like this. I think it's good, but then what if I'm totally wrong? What if so that's why I've never really sent things out for critiques. I just get to the point where this is kind of the story I wanted to tell and I like it. And it also helps that my book is more, it's an homage to stuff like Goonies and stuff like that, which isn't like high art. I mean, I love the movie The Goonies, but of course, if I wanted to, I can go pick it apart and I could be like, oh, there's a plot hole there, or this kid, the character's a little bit one note or whatever. But so I don't worry too much about that because that's kind of the genre I'm trying to capture. But I could go to somebody and show it to, somebody and say, well, this character's kind of like this is their thing and there's not much else to them or whatever. Which that wouldn't, I guess, necessarily bother me as much because again, I'm trying to kind of capture that sort of story. Now, if I was trying to tell something a little more realistic or whatever, it might be a different story. But so for me, I don't know. I try to just get motivation myself by doing something, capturing the stuff that I want to capture, telling the story I want. And then, usually, and because I am on YouTube and I show this stuff, I do get feedback along the way. But a lot of that is more until somebody's actually read it. It's more about, oh, I like the artwork or whatever. But then when you put it back there and you get positive feedback, and like I had like Crimson Owl Comics and Fogbreaker Studios. They got a channel where they review horror comics, and they took each one of my books and they reviewed it, and it was all very positive, and it's kind of nice to get that. So you get stuff like that, and that's really cool. Most of it's, again, sort of for me, but it is nice when you get positive feedback. But I would say in Gary's situation, the one thing that, if you are looking to go somewhere beyond the self-publishing, I think because I don't want to say for whatever reason, because that's not true, because I can see why, because I've read the books, but your book is just one of those books that when you read it, you want to tell people about it. And Squatchy's in the chat, and he can contest that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I mean, and once I read it, I mean, there's a lot of books that I read that I really like, that are really good, but it's not like, it's not something that I go out and like actively. You got to read this. I mean, it's so good. And your book is just one of those books. So, and I think, I mean, and the fact that we kind of jokingly talked about how you kind of disappear into the work, and then you come back like a month or so before you're about to launch it. And I would never recommend that strategy to anyone, because if you're not constantly in front of people, I think you lose people. But
it's not a great strategy. Like, it's not.
But it seems to work, because you drop it, and it's kind of like this. Until I read your book, I thought, well, this is this is probably going to be a good book that probably not a lot of people will be exposed to, just because he doesn't do that much promotion on it. And we talk about this all the time, where you can have the best book in the world, but if people don't know about it, then it's not going to sell. But just, I think you putting it out there, and I think the word of mouth factor of your book is that. I mean, I think that's what's really driving a lot of stuff. So you don't actually have to do it as much, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky to have some really good, supportive fans who do go out there and say, like, guys, you got to read this book, which I'm very, like, Squatch, I see him in there. Like, he's definitely one of them. There are a few, and they mean a lot to me. A few of them got little Easter egg shout outs in '97. Because sometimes you'll hear names of soldiers or something, so I'll throw in somebody's last name. But but definitely, because I think of all this stuff, this idea of like kind of getting over your fear and getting, putting your work out there and trying to like grow up a little bit. I feel like now, like, my priority, certainly for the rest of the year, is like, I think I need to spend more time with promotion. Like, when I finished 75, I was high on the whole creative process. It was really good. It was very positive. I got that hit of like, wow, the proof showed up and I can't believe I did a thing. Mm-hmm. I had an idea for the next one, and it was like, it was like a couple months and I started 97. Like, right, mm-hmm. Like I was just barely off of 75. 97 was 2 years, and I am exhausted. Like, I am wiped out. And part of it is also like everything that's going on. We've got mm-hmm. COVID, we got crazy politics. Like, I mean, it's just like madness. And I'm a little fried, and I need some time to kind of recharge my creative banks anyway. Yeah. But this is a good time. It's like, well, you know what? Maybe I will finally like submit a couple places. Maybe I need to finally build a website. Maybe I need. Yeah,
that's one thing that I noticed that you don't have yet. That you probably should have.
I have Instagram and the YouTube, basically.
Yeah,
it's a good idea to use times kind of between too. So it's like, rather than sort of just resting, it's like almost like picking something a little opposite. That's a different side of the brain, yes. for rest on that side, and then you can switch back. I've thought very similarly, like when like I don't feel like I can rest until I have like a proof and a release date, and then I'm not going to feel like I can rest. But I do feel like that point of having a proof and a release date, like I'll be able to switch gears more into promotion mode and stuff like that, because and use that as more of like a break. And I do think, but I also think there's something to be said for like focusing and making the best thing you can make, and then worrying about the promotion. Like I do actually think there's something to be said for that. Because I mean, why not? Like, why not make it good? And then
it's the only gear I have. You know,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I've tried, like, for example, like the making of videos for 97. My original plan was I'm going to release these as I'm working. So like while I'm writing the script, I'm going to be putting videos out about writing. And then once I start doing page planning, like I'll do videos about that. And I got almost immediately, I realized like I can only do one thing at a time. Like I can't be like writing a script and now editing a video in Premiere to put on YouTube. Like it was just, I was completely overwhelmed. And that's, some people can do it. I just realized like that's not how my brain works. Like it would be better and smarter. And if you can do it and you're a creator out there, I would say like you should be visible the whole time. I can't do the best comic I can and maintain a social media presence and promote and, you know, do all that stuff. Like I kind of have to go dark and focus on this one thing intensely.
Yeah. I mean,
it seemed, like I said, I don't know if I would recommend that, but it seems to work for you. I mean, and I understand that because I kind of pretty much for the most part let my Instagram go. Like they were trying on the live stream I was on today, they're trying to promote it. I said, full disclosure, I think it's been a year since I post, because the last time I posted on Instagram was when I was doing Inktober last year. Yeah. So, and it's just, I got to the point where it wasn't helping my productivity. I mean, it probably would help promotion. So, but I do have other promotion I am, obviously YouTube and stuff like that. So I'm kind of picking and choosing, but.
Yeah. Like I've given up my Facebook. I mean, the Dinosaurs versus Marsbots Facebook page, if I post something on my personal page about DvsM, I'll like share it over to it. And sometimes I have my Instagram set up where like I can share a post from Instagram to Facebook, but there's never really any original content on the Facebook. It's very much an afterthought. Yeah. And that was very much like, I'm going to just put my chips on YouTube and Instagram because I don't have a website. Once I have a website, maybe like the Instagram will be less important. I don't know.
Yeah.
Instagram, I'm starting to get disillusioned with. And in fact, I've done this a couple times before. I don't know why I think isn't the definition of insanity doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? Like that, isn't that the old?
Yeah. I
spent $30 promoting a post on Instagram. Thinking like maybe I'll get some follows, it'll get something happening. And I don't know if you guys have had the same experience if you've done this. You get like 300 likes by all these weird made up sounding accounts. Like they're just very strange. And like so far I think as of today I've netted like 3 new follows. Like it seems like such a just stupid waste of time. Like now I have followers and I still post there, but I don't know how to really break out on Instagram. I don't know how that even works. I mean, Dan Ekus, I guess, would know, but like I'm falling out of love with Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the wrong person to ask that kind of thing. Scott might have better, but I haven't spent a dime on my own advertising since starting as an illustrator or designer. And I mean, I should say I kind of have, because I've like printed books and maybe done like posters to sell and stuff, but I've never paid for advertising. I've never tried it. So I'm kind of, I'm always suspicious of it, which may not be good, because I do know, like I have friends who've done it and have had effective promotions with it for product or for releases and things like that. But what I have noticed on Instagram is I don't personally see a mass amount of growth. I see it like it kind of goes up and then like that. And it's kind of teetered between like the same rise and fall for like the last year and a half. But I also personally, like, I kind of wonder, like for myself, I wonder if that's because like most of what I post is just like process stuff. Like I haven't released anything huge in a while. So it's like, there's not like, other than my core group, I don't know if there's a lot of reason for it to I don't know, but that's kind of my take. But I have thought about it because I'm always curious. Same with Facebook ads. Like, I've never done it, and it makes me insanely curious. But I'm such a cheapskate. Like,
well, that's why it was like $30. It's like, this is a low.
Yeah, that's not bad.
But like, well, and some of it is you can't tell if you're doing it right, because when you go to set up the ad, it says like, all right, well, what are you targeting? What demographic? And it's like, I mean, I picked like, I don't know, 15 to 45 with an interest in indie comics. Like, I don't know, like, let's try that. And that's where it's like the result of it, assuming it's even working, which I don't know if I should have picked something different. Like, if I should pick conspiracy theories, or I should pick, I don't know. You end up with, like I said, with all these weird not even follows, weird likes by private accounts with weird names that, for all you know, are made up. Like, I mean, I'm not going to get all conspiracy theory about it, but it occurred to me, is like, does Instagram just have made up accounts? Like, you pay and they're like, oh, now these 500 accounts are going to like your post, and like, there you go, we'll collect your $50 now. But I don't know. I don't know. That's part of why I don't like. I get so suspicious of all of that, but also, like I said, I've known people who've had like pretty wild success who aren't as like penny pinching crazy as I am, where I'm like, even $5, I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not spending $5 on it. And it's like kind of stupid, because like, if it were a business that I were creating an Instagram account for, I'd be like, no, you should probably invest in like paying for advertising, and like, it's a no-brainer. It's just, for me personally, I don't know what the hang is. I don't know, Scott. Like, have you ever run ads on Instagram? And if so, did you have any returns for it? You dropped Instagram from what you were saying.
I've never run ads on Instagram. I have on Facebook, and I don't know if it's successful. I mean, I know you can be successful, but I think there's just a huge, especially now, I think if you had jumped in early, you would have been at a better place. But right now, I mean, there's people that do really well with Instagram or Facebook ads, but I think there's a pretty big learning curve, and you've got to learn. It's a lot of trial and error before you get it right. The one thing I am doing right now is I just set up some ads for some of my books on Amazon. So I'll let you guys know how that goes, because it's a little different, where I don't really think there's any bots or anything, because it's, it's a whole different way the ads work and everything. So I'll have to see, what happens. I ran one before, and I probably should have kept it going, because the book started selling. I was losing a little bit of money, but I think I should have stuck with it a little longer, because I think eventually I would have got more sales. And once the book starts selling on Amazon, you can remove the ads, and because it's ranking higher, because Amazon pushes books that rank higher, and also you start getting reviews and things, then they'll start to sell on their own. So that's kind of where I am right now, because so far I haven't had a whole lot of success with just people finding them via my keywords. I mean, some books they'll find them, but just not to the point, because I know that the books that I put out there are good enough.
Yeah.
It's just people have to see them. So, but we're kind of getting off in another area. I know we're moving in at least past like the hour and a half, if not close to 2 hours. But so I don't know if there's anything more on the topic that we didn't touch that we want to wrap up with.
Not from me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we walked around it pretty good, and then we touched on some other things as well.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do what we always do, and then close everything out. I guess we'll start with Josh.
Awesome. So you can check out my stuff at joshuakemble.com. I also will endorse this. I haven't read the second book. I'm eager to do so. I really enjoyed the first, so I really endorse this book. So anyhow, but yeah, you can check out my stuff at joshuakemble.com, quarterlystories.com, but don't do it till after you've checked out Gary's books, because they're really fun reads. And that's the other thing. It's like we talked about, like pacing and and kind of the artsy elements of it, but it is important to mention they're super fun reads too. So yeah, so there's that.
All right. So, and then let's hold on. I got to go back up here. Where's the book? All right. Okay, Gary. What about you?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks so much, guys.
Absolutely.
Back. It's great to be back, and I appreciate it. You guys have both been very supportive, and I do not ever forget that. So, new comic out, DvsM 1997. I've got it right here. There's also 75. You can't get this version right now. This is sold out right now, but there is the exclusive. I didn't think to bring it in here. There's an exclusive limited edition pulp variant that kind of has a salacious woman in peril cover. On sale now, right now, I'm doing free shipping of the new one for the first 2 weeks. Now we're about a week in, so there's about a week left. It's $2. It's not the end of the world if you miss it, but it's $2. Like if you want to save $2, you can find it at my Etsy shop. If you need to know more before you buy, you can go to my YouTube channel. I'm just under Gary Hodges. I have a bunch of videos about the making of 97, talking about like just every stage of it, the writing, concept design, page planning, all that. You can get a feel for what I'm doing. And there's my Instagram account, which is just Dinosaurs versus Marsbots, where you can see little panels and glimpses of the comic and stuff like that. So that's me.
Yeah, and I mean, really, honestly, take my word for it. Go buy both. If you have the first one, then I don't need to tell you because you already know how good that was, and the second one is no different. And then, so I would say if you don't have either of them, get them both. You know, they're just great books. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've already kind of sung Gary's praises on here throughout the show. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. That's nice.
Yeah. So, and as far as me, you can find my work at circworks.com, but I would probably right now point you over to Design Cuts, where if you go to Design Cuts, my new product, the Amazing Comic Book World Builder, just if you think you may be a little, if you want to know more about it, just go and check it out. Look through it if you're a comic book creator, and you can see all the stuff that it has included, and then you can kind of make a decision from there. But right now it's 50% off. It probably will never be that price again. And as well as all my products on Design Cuts are 50% off right now. That includes the Comic Maker Starter Kit. I'm in the Comic Maker Toolkit, the Hero Design Studio, all my avatar builders, everything. Those are all over at Design Cuts. So definitely check those out. And that's, you got another maybe week and 2 or 3 days for that sale. And I wanted to also thank everyone in the chats. We got a lively chat going on. A lot of Gary's fans in there, and they'll tell you what I just told you about how great this book is. So go pick that up. And then this show that we do, the Artcasters, we do this show every week. It rotates from Josh's channel to my channel. Next, this is episode 249, so next is 250, which is kind of a milestone. So we'll see what Josh has planned. It's up to Josh if there's anything going on for 250. But it does rotate back and forth between our two channels, usually on Thursdays around 9 Pacific time, but that can vary depending. So the easiest way to know when we're going to broadcast what channel, all that stuff, is just join our mailing list. We don't spam you or anything like that. There's a link in the description of this video. If you click on that, then you'll always know when we're about to go live. We usually try to send that out at least 30 minutes ahead of time. So definitely check that out. I want to thank Gary for coming on and for producing an awesome book. And looks like you got another thing that popped in. That's weird. Oh, okay. Yeah, hold on.
What is going on?
Hey, there we are. Yeah, so we have to let you in. So I didn't even know you froze. I thought you were just like very. Was
I just sitting there, just like very still and polite? Yeah. Okay, well, that's better than going black. I didn't want it to look like it's like, well, I'm done. I did my promo. Boom. You know.
I'm gonna try to. Oh, there we go.
Awesome. Okay. I think you should have left the second you up there, like frozen. That's how it does.
I think it kicked itself off. I didn't touch anything. So
sorry.
Anyway, so thanks for coming on, Gary. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Yeah. We really appreciate you guys, and we'll be back next week on Josh's channel. Later,
Bye.
everyone.